Jade, good to see you. Yes, this is this topic has popped up a few times now today.
Yes.
African language models. So Jade Abbott, the founder of Lalapa AI, and Mashikane, I mentioned it earlier, doing amazing work. I think it's UP predominantly.
No.
Okay, well, you're going to have to correct us.
Globally.
But we look forward to this conversation. Please give a warm applause. Thank you, Jade. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry that you have to sit here. I know you're probably all hungry, but it's only 20 minutes, and I'll try to be brief. I need a clicker. Otherwise, we're not going to go.
They're just doing the
far.
battery. I think they'll be.
I suppose I'll stand here. I would want to get noises out of the crowd and be like, yay. Won't do that. Let me wait 2 seconds. A lot of buzzwords, eh? Generative AI. I think it's just become the new name for machine learning. A new bucket name. Everything's generative, even if it's not meant to be. Sorry, this is just my thoughts while I stand here and wait for a clicker. Cool, yeah. So today, the title of my talk was language models, building language models for African languages. But we're going to talk a bit more generally about how computers can speak African languages. And this is important. We know it's important. It's come up so many times today because it is such an important problem. I really love this quote by Nanjala Nyabola, who's a Kenyan author. Language is not just words. It's constructed self, an orientation towards the world, an attempt to make sense of external phenomena. Language is the hands with which our minds reach into the world and try and make sense of it. If we think about it, just in South Africa, we haven't quite got stats yet on the rest of the continent, but in South Africa, only 1 in 10 people in South Africa speak English at home, right? Right now, all our chatbots only work in English. And so if you actually want to get to greater customer reach, you really need to start adding in the other languages and start looking at them quite intensely. We're only addressing 10% of people in their home language. If we want to connect as a brand, if we want to really understand what they're saying, let's add Zulu, let's add Xhosa, let's add Sesotho, let's add Setswana and Afrikaans. And I think we mentioned this earlier. There was C4. You know this one? When you're in the Uber and you're driving and it says, drop off C4. Or drop off Phumzile instead of Phumzile. These systems have not been built for us. This was when ChatGPT first came out. They've since fixed it. When ChatGPT first came out, count from 1 to 10 in isiZulu, this is what we got. You do this now, it doesn't do it anymore. Clearly we corrected it. We did tweet about it a little bit and wrote a blog, so I think they saw it and got upset. We also we trained a translation model using GPT 3.5. So we've got our original sentence there. The target, for those who cannot speak isiZulu, is I feel like there could be more done to help people within this industry. Pretty straightforward sentence, and somehow ChatGPT translated it as I skipped around trying to use as much plant material as I could. And I wish I was making this up, but I wasn't, because this is what was happening. And it kind of drives back this thing that we know about these LLMs, the large language models. But at the end of the day, they're just what they call stochastic parrots. They're just predicting the next most probable word. Things that used to do this, do you remember auto-predict on your cell phone? It's the same thing, just bigger. That is all that happened. We took something that's literally 20 years old. We changed the architecture a bit, we made it deeper, it's a lot more powerful, sure. But at the end of the day, it just randomly predicts stuff. And this is where we have to be concerned. So who am I? I'm Jade. I have been in NLP, so been in language technology space for the last 10 years or so. I am the co-founder of Masakane. So Masakane is an open grassroots community based on doing language technology research for African languages. Co-founded a company this year, NLP startup called Lalapa AI. Woo! We raised our seed round of $2.5 million in Feb, so still celebrating that. And then I'm also on the Responsible AI Council for Cohere. So these are reasons I might have something useful to say. So Masakhane, like I said, grassroots organization. Our goal is to kind of ensure that we can support African languages going forward. So there was talk about data earlier and how there's a lack of it. And so I decided to do this years ago, and I was like, I would like to start building tools in these languages. It's around 2016, 2017. Came across many, many, many roadblocks. Every single thing I tried to do, whether it was building a translation model or building a chatbot, there was no data, there was no tooling, there was no research, there was nothing, or next to nothing anyway. And I like to bring this picture to kind of explain. We talk about data, we talk about a lot as something that's missing, but actually there's a lot of things you need to make these systems work. Any language technology. You need to have someone who's producing content. Right now, Africa's got a huge problem in that because of colonial times, a lot of our text, a lot of our stories are not actually captured, they're not digitized, and so we don't have people producing content. If we're dealing with a lot of language technology, you need annotations, you need translations, and so we don't have annotated content either. There are some languages, many languages actually, which you don't even have the right keyboard on Google to actually type in your language. So how on earth are we going to end up with them kind of being represented at all on the internet? Then it goes through a curator. This is this idea of being able to select what should go and shouldn't go into a language model. And then you need language technologists who have the right toolkits, who have the right compute, who take these data sets and can then actually build the models, and then we need to evaluate it. And for African languages, at least in 2017, there was nothing. We couldn't, each of these connections, each of these steps, there was an issue. We did not have the prerequisite people, we did not have the prerequisite requirements, and thus we couldn't produce any of the artifacts necessary to build this technology. Thankfully, after Masakhane, we've done a lot of work. So Masakhane, as I mentioned, there are now over 1,000 people who are part of the organization. We've produced hundreds of research papers. A lot of them are contributing data sets for the different African languages from across the continent. I think it's across 40 countries at least. And so we've done a fair amount. We've built keyboards for different languages. We've helped build Language ID. We've annotated a lot of content that exists. We've got some data sets. We've even trained a number of models which are open source, which can be downloaded. But there's still a way to go. Original content is still scarce, quite expensive to create. And there's still things that don't exist for everything other than English. So even the metrics which we use to evaluate how good something is doing is English-based. Cool, so what do we do? And so it's a little bit different. We were in a different context. We're in this, I saw an article about GPU poor, which means you don't have the compute to be able to train these things. We're data poor, so we're in this low resource environment. And so what can we do to really build up these models? So the first one is intentional high-quality data collection. So instead of scraping the whole internet, which is the privilege that English gets, what we need to do is create data. We need to be very intentional about it. We sometimes have to be very focused about it, and you have to spend money on doing it. And if you create it and it's high quality, you can actually get very good performance. A nice example of this is this paper, which we did, where it's called A Few Thousand Translations Go a Long Way. We were building a machine translation system. And with only 2,000 sentences, they were able to build a pretty good machine translation tool. And they did it by, first of all, creating these 2,000 sentences for each of the languages, but then they also combine them all because there's some relation between them, which is really cool. The next kind of trick in the box is being participatory about it, so including people who actually speak the languages as part of the process. I think often people who are building language models tools, OpenAI, etc., don't have people who actually work in those languages or who understand those languages actually building the software and training the models. And so this example is one where we got 35 African languages from people all over the continent to actually build some models. Similarly, I wanted to quickly check something because I listed out a slide. Oh yeah. Next one is a kind of understanding the like multilinguality component. So the fact that these languages are related, let's try combine the data that we've got for them and see if they can kind of help each other. And so here's another example of a paper where they created entity recognition data sets. For those of you who understand the behind the scenes of chatbots, at least kind of the pre-generative wave, entity recognition was something that was really important. To be frank, and we created these community annotated data sets, which are now available, and we've actually trained and released models for each of the languages, which are performing state of the art. And then lastly is, like I said, everyone wants to use the biggest model possible to get good performance. But actually, what you need is something well-tuned for the size of your data. If your data is smaller, throwing a massive model at it is just going to make it overfit. It's not just going to memorize everything that's in there. And we found that by tuning your hyperparameters well, by actually making it fit, making the model fit the size of the data, you actually get great performance. And so Matsakane did the groundwork for years, particularly through COVID. We had nothing else to do, so we went and we did research, and it was this hobby that everyone was doing on the side after work. It's quite incredible that what everyone was able to achieve. And now, a couple years later, we're at the point where startups are ready to start springing out of this. We can finally build the language technology we've always wanted to build. And so this is one of the reasons we founded Lalapa AI, which is a socially grounded, Africa-centric AI research and product lab. And we've got a product called Vulivula. The goal is to speak your language. And why is it us? Why is it us who do this? Why is it people who are on the continent who need to be doing this and not the open AI? It's because we have the local language expertise. We've got the local linguists we work with. We understand the languages in detail. We understand the context, right? We know that the context and the ethics and the everything around that relates to our country, or not even our country, might even be our province. And then local solutions is that we are able to actually engage with businesses in their context and understand their problems in a way that people in the West might not understand, and this is talking back to, we don't have electricity half the time, so, how we can't really connect to a server every 2 seconds if you're not going to be able to do so. So currently our features that we're really focusing on are converse, transcribe, and analyze. So converse, this is why we're all here. This is our conversational AI support. Transcribe, we can take speech in our voices and be able to take it to text. Analyze, able to look at text and be able to extract features out of it. And in the future, we'll be having speak and translate. Right now, unlike many chat companies, we are looking at our indigenous languages first. So isiZulu was the one we targeted first. It's also the hardest one to build anything for. But we've actually doing quite well, and also South African English. And so these are very much in beta testing. We're working with partners. And so if you want to be part of that partner journey, come chat to me. And then we're doing Sesotho, Xhosa, Setswana, and Afrikaans is kind of in alpha testing. This is kind of going through the run with our linguists. We're looking after the child as we grow it, referring to the previous talk. And there's a little video in here. I wonder if I can play it with this. No, can't. Can you try click on the thing and see if it does the thing? We got Sophie and all these crazy technologies, but we can never get this fixed. It might not have been exported because I exported it as a... If it doesn't work, I'll have to describe it. I'll ask you to email it. Ask me to email it to you. And there we go. Can make that big. Can probably put it on twice speed, because otherwise we're going to be bored here for a while. Ooh, internet. Ooh, guys. So this is just a little demo about what we did at the beginning of the year. And here we can see we are Sawubona. There's Gunjani. Wenzani, which is what do you do? It says, I'm a bot, I can help you with your payments. And eventually we start asking it, so you can see it can do that intent detection, so it's able to pick up, what are we talking about and give the adequate response. We can then ask it to pay someone. So, like I said, this is just a little demo. So I think I'm going to ask, it asks Leleti Kumalo, we're going to pay Leleti Kumalo 20 Rand or something from our savings account. You probably can't see. Yeah, it really isn't great resolution, is it? But if you can see over there, it's able to extract Leleti Kumalo, it's able to extract the 20 Rand, it's able to extract savings, and you can say, yes, you want to confirm that you can do it. And so here, if you continue watching this video, you'll see we ask it in 3 different ways. We even switch to English, and it's able to respond. It's able to detect that you've switched to English and then able to respond in English and handle the English queries. We switch to Afrikaans. It comes back and says, sorry, I don't speak Afrikaans. Could you speak English or isiZulu? And it's just kind of demonstrating the fact that we do have this capability in that. Okay, I'm not going to go through this whole thing because it's a long video. I should have made it shorter. Can we please skip to the next slide? Because I have 4 minutes. And this is probably 4 minutes. Yeah, so when I talk about code switching, that's the thing that we do in South Africa, which is switch languages 10 times within one paragraph or even within one sentence. Thank you. Ooh. These are more boring. It's all very techy. I'm going to skip this one. Basically, it says our Zulu model is the best for transcription against Azure, Google, and Amazon. Just bragging now. Similarly, so for our analyze model and our translate, but the bit that I would really like to show is our little, I skipped around trying to use as much plant material as I could. So you can see, I see there's a lot you can do to help people at this establishment, which is a lot closer to, I feel like there could be more to help, more done to help people within this industry. That's a translation, right? If you gave that sentence to 2 different people, they would translate it like that. And so kind of the moral of this story is that a lot of people want to try take what's being done in the English space and retrofit it to how can we work within the African space. So fine-tuning these large language models that are provided by non-African companies rather than building African-centric models results in much poorer performance. And this is across the board on all the different tasks that I've shown you. So that's me. If you'd like to chat to me, I'll be around, email, Twitter, whatever,
That was great, Jade. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Now, let's give her a hand. It's so encouraging to know that this kind of work is done in Africa by Africans. Maybe the first question I want to ask you, is there interest or even funding from our government into initiatives like this?
That's a good question. I mean, I believe there is. So I know that there are people working in the universities and at the CSIR who are working on, actually we've got one of them here, who are working on African languages. I think as working with government, it's just very time consuming. There's a lot of process that needs to be done to get there. So the process is slow, but the funding is there. And it's just the politics and the applying for funding. It's the part that the reason I felt the need to move from a kind of more NGO community space into a startup space is that the access to funding is much more liquid, I would say, whereas actually getting it from like a government space or an NGO space is a very long 2-year process to get funding, which is just a nightmare.
I can just imagine the future of this when it comes to education in our continent. So please keep on with the good work. 1 or 2 questions for Jade, perhaps before we break for lunch. There's one hand up there and a hand up there. The usual suspects, at least somebody's asking questions. Go on, please.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Jade. So in that example you showed us there with the WhatsApp chatbot, is that intent-based, like
Intent-based.
Responses written and then served up? And then is the goal to get to generative model? Is that, yeah?
I think this is where we need to ground ourselves again, is that generative will not be possible until we can even do intent, because intent is the basics. It's classification. We need the right language model behind that to do anything. And so, yes, the goal would be to get to generative, but it'll be a while. And if we skip that step, we're going to miss a whole bunch of fundamental important points in actually developing the technology. and actually getting a lot of use out of it in the interim, right? It's going to take loads and loads of money and investment to get there. And so the interim space is what can we do with what we've got now, gain the traction, still build things that are very useful, and then move to generative. And so that's just like from a strategic position, but also just like from a practical position, this is the best way to do it.
There was a hand up here.
Hi, Jed. Thanks for the talk. I just wanted to check, when it comes down to some of the people in the audience, in terms of big corporates and maybe smaller SMMEs, what role can these companies play in helping the journey of localizing this technology for South Africans and even Africa at large?
Cool. There are a couple ways, and some of them are quite touchy. So we've already gone through the data problem, and I guess the data problem is there's a bigger thing. We can't just give over data. They can't give us data. They can't open source data because no matter what you do with that data, there is private information in it. And no NLP technique we have guarantees that we can remove the private information. We've got people who've actually done PhDs in Masakhane who, even in English, cannot do this. It's not possible. We cannot guarantee it. And so there's a danger, and it violates a whole bunch of POPIA principles to being handing over this data to another company to be able to do that. I think one of the things they can do is that there might be data that can be de-anonymized, or it is FAQs, it is the knowledge bases, and those we can work to how can we make those more accessible. They're accessible on your website anyway. Is there a way we can kind of come to grant access to organizations to be able to use it for research, primarily, because step one is being able to do the research and being able to publish on that. You don't necessarily have to even release it into the wild. It just needs to be available to researchers so that they can make progress in the field. And then second, it's how can we as a group, as a partner, as a joint venture, come together and build the right tools, right? So you guys might have data, we might not have data. Can we come up with something where we both benefit from the situation? So we can build the tools, your customers will have access to them, and you will provide some of the data that can help build that. Those are some of the ways. I think the other component is, just investing in the local ecosystem. There are people across the African continent, there are startups across the African continent that work in NLP who aren't OpenAI. And we are blinded because we're looking at all the big shiny companies and what they're doing. But if we really want to support African languages, let's support those startups. Let's speak to them and see what they can build us, because what they can build us will actually surprise us.
Fantastic. Let's take a last question. There's a hand up front here.
Oh, and fund data set creation. You don't have to make your own. You can fund the data set creation.
So just from a quality perspective, so obviously we spoke earlier about tonality, right? So how do you distinguish, because obviously you're getting a data set, is it formal, is it informal? Because as a business, as a corporate, I want to sound more on the formal, not the informal side.
How do we distinguish? Well, it really depends on your application. Do you have a specific application in mind?
So if you're using a chatbot for an enterprise, I'm going to use this model.
Yeah.
And I want it to answer in Zulu. When I want it to answer, I don't want it to answer in a very, like the tone of my business is not colloquial, right? I want it to be more formal.
So with this style of chatbots, so there kind of been 3 generations in chatbots. First chatbot range was menu-based, basically using a form. Second chatbot range was this intent detection, but you send back predefined responses, and that's kind of the space we're playing in. We're able to smartly detect, that's the NLU component, which go, but we don't generate responses. And so the data you're providing is the data you've provided, and we don't vary from that. And the third generation is generative, which provides that more flexible, more conversational, more tonal part later on. But that's a bit, in this space, you're going to end up with there's already issues in English, and if you try and move that to the African languages, it'll be absolute chaos. We have this really funny story of, time's up, but it's lunch, sorry, where we were training a system on the only available data at the time for many languages was the Bible. And we were building just a translation system at the time, so not chatbots, but translation. And it translated, we just gave it something about, a sentence about Canada, and it translated it to Canaan. So it almost biblified the things that we were adding to it. And so it's just that really, like, it's really important what data is provided to these systems. And so in your specific use case, it's very much like, let's build a model for formal case, versus not formal.
Jade, this is super. Thank you so much. It was great. Keep on going
very
with the
much.
good work, and let's give her a warm applause. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, it's lunchtime, so we're going to come back at 10 to 2. If you go out of the door and you turn right, you go all the way through to the restaurant. Keep your tag on, because they'll most likely make sure you're not an imposter wanting a free lunch. And when we come back, we will have the MTN team back on stage again, looking at the Ziggy chatbot. We'll see you in a few minutes then.
Okay, it's a pleasure, sir.